Okay, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We are live. Uh, Finally, my apologies for the technical difficulties that we had in the last few minutes. My
It was
name
my
is
fault.
And mine
No,
too.
it was me being a Luddite. I'm a very late adopter of technology. I very recently got a Kindle, so maybe it was like the world sending back its karma on me. So my name is Hind Makki, everyone. I'm dialing in from Chicago in the Midwest in the United States, where I'm from. I was born and raised here to Sudanese immigrant parents. And with me are three of my panelists. Be awaiting our fourth panelist, inshallah, when she flies in. All the way from Paris currently is Khalid Albaih, who is a Sudanese independent political cartoonist living in Doha, Qatar. And we will be hearing more about him and his experiences. Thank you, Khalid, for dialing in, from Paris in the middle of your travels.
I'm in the airport right now, actually.
You're in the oh, okay. Wonderful. And then next we have Isma'il Kushkush, who is a Sudanese American journalist who is based in Khartoum and Nairobi for many years, where he contributed to the New York Times and CNN, Voice of America. And he also grew up in the United States, but also around the world as well, and we'll be hearing more about his experiences as well. Thank you, Isma'il, for joining us.
Thank you.
And all the way on the West Coast, we have Hana Baba, who is another Sudanese American journalist. She hosts and reports for the news magazine Cross Currents at KALW Public Radio in San Francisco, and also for National Public Radio and Public Radio International. She focuses on immigrant communities, religion, and culture, and we're happy to have her join us as well. Thank you, Hana, for joining us.
Thank you, Hind.
All right, wonderful. So we're just going to jump right into it. I have been hosting a series this Black History Month called Zol Sol. And what Zol Sol is asking people to do is, it's offering a platform for Sudanese all over the world, in Sudan and everywhere else, to share their experiences, to interrogate their relationship as Sudanese people with the concept of blackness, and with sort of racialized identities in the 21st century, especially for people who are in the diaspora. And so that's what this roundtable is part of, that series. And I really wanted us to focus on race, faith, and Sudanese identities. So I just want to jump right into this. And Khalid, I'm going to start with you. You share a sort of, you have somewhat different experiences than Isma'il, Hana, and myself, where you actually grew up in the Middle East as a Sudanese national. And then you also spent some time recently in the United States. So I just wanted to ask you to share with us some of your experiences as an adolescent, as a young man in Qatar and in the Middle East, and how that shaped your views of being a Sudanese person, of being a black man in that society.
I mean, first of all, assalamu alaikum, everybody, and thank you for having me. Growing up in Fil Khalid, and the GCC is you can see it as quite normal because there's a lot of Sudanese people. Everybody speaks Arabic and so on. But at the same time, when I first went there, when I first came to Qatar, I think in 1990, I just realized that we have this stereotypical image about Sudanese people, but nobody really knows anything about Sudanese people or about Sudan. It's just it's the tall black guys, and they're very modest all the time, and they're of course recently now we became the lazy population as well, and that it's just all stereotypical things that just get laid on you. And like very, very superficial. Nobody knows anything about us. And being kids there, we were just struggling the whole time trying to say, we're from here, we speak Arabic, this is our history, this is that, but it was just so hard introducing yourself the whole time and trying to introduce a culture, you know. So there's it's very hard because of course, you know, the media, you know, doesn't play a role at all. The only media that actually played a role was the Egyptian media, and of course, you know how they portray Sudanese people and any people of color at all
المامبو
from
السوداني.
sorry.
المامبو السوداني.
بالضبط، المنبو السوداني والبوابة السوداني وعثمان السوداني. It's
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right here.
yeah,
So mambo, Sudani, so that's like the Sudanese mambo,
yes,
right?
it's
And
a song, yeah.
the doorman, you're talking about like stereotypes of like the doorman and the sort of the shifty black, you know, worker.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more with for our international audience?
Well, it's the first thing is because, you know, Sudan and Egypt were one country and they were under the Egyptian king, and you know how they look at it is that, you know, so the Sudanese people, they were always, and this is how the cinema portrays it, and that's what became, you know, the thing in people's minds, of course, because after a while that becomes the truth, you know, that you know there's nobody else in Egypt that was Sudanese except for, you know, the doormen of the buildings, and they can't speak really good Arabic because they were Nubian or they were, you know, from the south of the valley. And of course, the other very famous song, which was also in a old Sudanese old Egyptian film, which is by Sayyid Khalifa, and it's called Al Bambu Sudani, you know. And so everything that people know about us, yeah, not people, but Arabs know about us internationally, is that, unless of course, you know, they're intellectuals or they're, you know, whatever, and then they know Tayyip Saleh and they know so and so. But it's always that media image that is portrayed of us that really shaped us until today, you know. And because our media doesn't play any part in that at all, so we always had to fight that. We always had to fight, you know, that no, we speak Arabic, no, we are Arab, no, we, you know, it was always that fight, you know. And of course, you know, when you start to travel, and when you look back at yourself after a while, you're like, why am I going through all of this? You know, yes, you know, I'm black, I am African, there's nothing wrong with it. What's wrong with that? You know, because in your head, and because of the Sudanese background, they'll always tell you, no, you have to be proud of your tribe. You have, you know, it's this person is from an Arabic tribe, and this person is from a not so Arabic tribe, and so on, you know. So we're taught certain things that really affect us, you know? And even for me as a political cartoonist, I'm so indulged in you know, and so involved in the Arabic politics and the Middle Eastern politics. I have no idea about Africa whatsoever. I'm not involved in the African politics at all, and that's because of the surroundings, and that's because of our history and so on, you know. But but when I came to America, then I was the black Muslim, you know. And you know, even yesterday in the train in Paris, I was sitting down and I'm talking to a friend of mine who's Palestinian. The woman next to me, she's like, how do you speak Arabic? Yeah, I was like, I'm from Sudan. She's like, oh, you guys speak Arabic, and she's Lebanese, you know. So and of course, you know, in Lebanon and of course the Sudanese people there. So I think it's really our problem, you know. Is we can't blame people for things that they don't know. We didn't give them any information about it, and we didn't give ourselves any information about it, and this is why we have this huge identity crisis that it's really a problem, you know. And you know, so it's just and I think it all ticks if you realize that you're actually black, you know, because most Sudanese people in their head, they're not black, they're not African, you know. We're more Arab than we're African, at least the Northerners, you know, or the people from the Central Sudan. But when it hits you, when you travel, or when you talk to other people, and when you find yourself trying to prove that you're Arab all the time, you're like, why am I trying to prove that? What does that even mean? You know, who am I? And then, you know, now it's starting to change. People are talking about the pyramids. People are talking about, you know, the Nubian history. People are trying to talk about all these other things. But you could still tell, you know, and even our relationship with the South, it's you know, this is how it always was. I mean,
I want to get to our relationship with the South a little later in the conversation, because I think you know, that at least here in the U.S. that has really shaped the way a lot of Americans see the two Sudans and see Sudanese. So I want to jump to Isma'il right now. You know, you're a journalist. You're somebody who in many ways shapes the way people view Africa, shapes the way people view East Africa, and you're working in a time right now where not only do you know, are afforded the space of working in long form as a print journalist, but you're also working in a time when, you know, social media and the conversation is so quick, and people don't want nuances. And I wanted to ask you to discuss a little bit, to share with the viewers who maybe didn't get to see your TEDx Soba talk, to really talk about what you're trying to get at when you are asked, and then you say, well, let me give you a short answer versus a long answer, and this concept of how nuanced can we get as Sudanese people when we talk about our different identities.
Right. Well, I mean, Sudanese identity is all about nuances. I mean, if you ask different Sudanese to describe themselves in terms of identity, you'll get several answers, and that's understandable because Sudan is a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religious society, and it's a modern nation state. So, I mean, forget the big identity labels as Arab and African and Black and so forth. Being Sudanese itself has been a challenge. What does it mean to be Sudanese? And also, I mean, there are issues of, you know, place and time. I mean, and terminology. Well, you know, terms like African, terms like Arab, Sudanese. I mean, what those terms meant initially have changed over time and place. So it's really important to understand the history of these terms, when they were adopted, and how they've changed over time. And they change because, you know, for different reasons. You know, personal reasons. One might choose to describe themselves as, you know, either as one or the other, Arab, African, Sudanese, or whatnot, you know, based on personal experiences, political ideology, social, economic interest. So, I mean, it's a changing matter. And I think, you know, if we don't understand these nuances, we really won't have a deep understanding of you know, the complexities. These identities is rich, and it's complicated. And I think the problem is not so much Sudanese trying to understand themselves, but it's the labels. The problem with the labels and trying to fit into you know, these big terms that I mentioned, African and so forth. And really, if you look at it, the real problem starts with colonial census, you know, trying to establish different categories, and Sudanese choosing how to describe themselves, what tribe they belong to, what color they are, and that, you know, replicates itself in the United States with the census. Are you Black?
Mm-hmm.
Are you white? What does white mean? Does it include North African or not? Does Black include others, you know, other than those descended of enslaved Africans? Does it include African migrants? Does it include people from the Caribbean? I mean, these are all different termings that change from place, whether you're, you know, here in the United States or you're in Sudan, and it changes with time. What, you know, I mean, it's interesting that many of us will describe ourselves today as Black, but in Sudan, that's a different, you know, that's a different term that has different meanings, with different. So, I mean, these things change. I think when we don't try to understand, you know, these specifics, I think we will continue to, you know, be in this, you know, the never-ending discussion over identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, my grandmother, late Hama, visited us about 10 years ago, and it was her first time to ever leave North Africa, the Middle East. She'd been, I believe, to Egypt and to Saudi Arabia for Hajj, and then America, and she was tripping out when we were telling her that we here are Black, and she would look at me, she's like, oh, even Hind is Black? And we're like, yeah, no, we're all Black. You're Black too. So I think it's really interesting because these terms, as you're mentioning, Isma'il, are politicized. They're about language. They're linguistic terms. You know, if I say that I'm Afro-Arab, that's very political. But if I say that I'm Arab, for me, you know, that means a linguistic identity rather than an ethnic or a racial identity. Whereas maybe a Palestinian who would say that they're Arab, that's more of an ethnic and a cultural and linguistic identity.
Right. I want to add one more thing. It's also important to understand how these terms correlate with political and economic power. People make the choices to identify often based on how that empowers them, either economically, socially, or politically. And that's why you see these changing understandings and meanings of certain terms. And these terms also change over time. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned, Palestinians, but for somebody from the Gulf or from Yemen, they don't, view people of the Levant as, so to speak, true Arabs. And there are, certain derogatory terms that are used to describe people of the Levant, and vice versa. So, these again, all these terms change according to place and time. I mean, I think the challenge for Sudanese and others is to come to a broad understanding that benefits, that serves the interests socially, economically, politically of one's community.
I have a funny story about an uncle. His name is Dr. Sadiq Awad, and he was teaching. He was asked to go teach during the apartheid in South Africa. So when he arrived in South Africa, at the immigration, there was blacks, white, and colored, and he didn't know where to go. And for me, that's the Sudanese mentality over there. He's like, I don't know where to go. So he went. And, at the end of the day, he's like, okay, I'm gonna go to the black. And he went to the black, and the immigration officer was like, you're not black, you're Indian. And he lived his life in South Africa as an Indian. His kids went to Indian schools. He lived in Indian neighborhoods, and that's it. He was Indian. So it's the same thing. It's like it was one thing for him to regard himself and say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna do this. And then the other thing is that the other people are telling him, no, you're not. So it's the same thing, and we face this every day. It's like you have to go through that conversation. Yeah, but we look different. Yeah, but there's another tribe. But it's Sudan is big. But again, I think it comes back to that nobody knows anything about it. Because we don't have information to give to the world, because we don't have information ourselves. Our education is not about that. We're not grown, and we're not educated to know ourselves as that. We are taught line by line. It's very simple, but it's not simple, and we should have a more of a wider spectrum, especially in education, a wider look at how we should view ourselves and be proud of ourselves.
Yeah, so Hana, you wrote about this recently. You wrote a really fantastic piece for the series. Thank you very much. And you wrote this really toward the end of your piece. You talked about so your whole piece was about growing up in America as a Sudanese American, and then also when you went back to Sudan, kind of your experiences as sort of looking at some of the internal racism that was occurring, and colorism and tribalism in Sudan. And then you ended your piece, you discussed kind of how now in America, in California, where you're from, there's a whole community of Sudanese Americans like yourself who are raising the next generation. So, can you talk a little bit about how it is you're teaching your children about their multiple identities as Sudanese, Muslim, Black, immigrant, as Khalid was saying, that education is really the key in terms of how we view ourselves, and then how we can tell our stories to the rest of the world.
Right. So actually right now somebody is subbing for me. I'm supposed to be at our Sunday school teaching my class called Sudan Studies, but I will go back after this. Yeah, so first, I think it's a blessing to be in California. I must say, being here, and especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, it is a very diverse area. My children's schools are full of people from all over the world. Moms at pickup time are wearing hijabs and saris, and it's a very diverse area. And And one of the things I like about this generation and this time, and maybe it's this place also, is you get asked the question, how do you identify? On some level, of course, that's a gender question, but it's also, I think, a question about your ethnicity, or, you know, what are you? Because this area is just such a mix of different people. You know, people no longer try to guess or assume what you are. And so this gives room, really, when you're growing in this environment, I think it gives room for that, just for a child to be able to say, I am 3 different things together and at once. Whereas this might have been hard when I was growing up in Texas or in Indiana or somewhere else, and at that time.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit? You know, some of your own challenges when you were younger. You know, it seems, it came across that you were very comfortable in who you are because of the way your family, your parents raised you. But what were some of, you know, can you share some stories of your interactions as a child with people as you tried to share with them who you were?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the first times when I knew I wasn't like everybody else was in 2nd grade and 3rd grade, when Patience Henderson and Passion Jackson, and yes, those were their names, Patience and Passion. So Patience and Passion were the African-American girls in my class. And they would always, you know, just kind of look at me funny, and they didn't like me at all. And I didn't get why. You know, like I say in the article, we had the same braid, like we had the same kind of braids, and the bulbulat right here, wahda hina, wahda hina, and just like, and we were the same color. And so until that point, I didn't get it. When my mom used to like come to the school, right? And my mom used to wear a scarf. And so they would, you know, kind of look at her funny and look at me funny. And that's when they started to ask the questions, which, you know, just like, what are you? Where are you from? What? You're black, but you're not black. What are you? And came, you know, and first it was, I thought, just curiosity. You know, oh, you're from Africa? Ooh. So you live in huts? You know, this is probably something very, very common. A lot of people are going, right now listening to this. Do you live in huts? Do you have an elephant for a pet? And so it went from that to this otherizing, as we call it today, right? Just like, sure, you look like us, but you're not like us. And that, to me, created really a sense of isolation, because if I wasn't like these other people and I wasn't like you, what was I? And, you know, where do I belong? And that's where my family came in and really kind of solidified this idea of Sudan, of Habobat. We had the books of Abdullah Tayyib, stories and the folk stories at home, and my mom would tell us all of these stories, and so like being Sudanese solved my problem. So I wasn't white, I wasn't Latino, and I wasn't black, but I was Sudanese and I was Muslim. These are the 2 things that were solid. Today, as I raise my girls, we have a big Sudanese community, which is a plus, and it's something my parents didn't have. We have, I mean, when I say big, the Bay Area, it's really not that. It's 200 families. Compared to other cities around the country, it's very small. But enough so that we get together every Sunday and we do Arabi, we do Islamic studies, we do Quran, and then we have a class. My class is called Sudan Studies. There's no book called Sudan Studies, so we have to kind of make it up as we go along. And materials online. Whenever we go to Sudan, we try to get books from the people that are, you know, like the booksellers at Farshim on the floor. Isma'il told me about them, so I just kind of go and get books from there, and make our own curriculum, really. And then all of these recent excavations and all these archaeological finds that are happening right now is just a really exciting time to be teaching our kids about Sudanese history. And I'm learning too. I didn't learn any of this. I was, as they say in Sudan, Shahadat London. I went to English schools when we went back to Sudan. Didn't take any Sudanese history. So I'm learning as well. And I'm surprised to know that even my mother is saying, we didn't learn about these things that you're talking about right now. And even their education in Sudan, people who grew up in Sudan in the 50s and the 60s, didn't learn about the kingdom of Kush that much. They didn't learn about the Kandakas, the Candaces, the queen warriors of Kush, and at least not in this detail. So we're learning along with our kids. They're learning about the Nile and its tributaries, and just we like to have like something theatrical that they present at the end of the year.
I want to be in that class. That sounds amazing.
I know. I want to be in that class. I wish we had this when we were little. But we're also having a lot of hard conversations. Again, just about identity, who we are. So, it's continuing. This question about identity will continue, I think, throughout the generations, but I think it's getting easier. And in a place like California or even New York or any of these coastal towns where there are many Sudanese, it will be easier.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of you touched on this point about how critical it is that we all tell our own stories because of the nuance, because of how diverse each of our own, family histories and tribal affiliations have been, and that is really the story of Sudan, the sense of diversity and nuance, and it's very, very difficult to cede giving that storytelling power to others, because then our identities and our politics and our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is just flattened in a way that makes it easier perhaps for others to consume, but is not at all accurate. Is not at all an accurate depiction of Sudan in all of its diversity. I kind of wanted, all of you touched upon this, and I wanted you to share maybe, an artist or a Sudanese artist or a writer or a musician, somebody who you are inspired by. You can't say yourself, and you can't say somebody else on the panel. Inspired by, because they've maybe offered a different angle into sort of this idea of multiple Sudanese identities, or somebody who just kind of reaches you in some way that you want to share with the audience that they should learn about.
Go ahead, Khalid.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to remember her name. She's the South Sudanese. She writes in Arabic. Stella
Gaetano.
I love her short stories, and I heard her speak once and about how she writes in Arabic, and in Sudan people are telling her, "Wallahi Arabiki kwais," like your Arabic is good. In Sudan, and she's Sudanese, and she grew up in Sudan, and she went to Khartoum University, and she writes these beautiful short stories. And now she had to, of course, go to the South. So I think she's amazing, and her stories are amazing, and her character, and this is really the problem that we don't see, and she writes about that, and sometimes a lot of times she doesn't write about that, in the race. She writes just as a Sudanese. And this is what we need to get rid of, is that والله يا أخي والله ناس هي جنوبية لكن بتكتب عربي. يعني فهمتني, we're doing the same thing that is done.
Right, that we can't be otherizing South Sudanese in this larger conversation about Sudan.
Yes, right. Exactly, and the same thing goes for the West, and the same thing, it's the same thing. So I really respect her and I admire her for that, definitely.
Can I go, because Isma'il might steal mine? We might have to.
Go ahead.
I'll pick Layla Abu Layla, the
Hey, so
writer.
mine.
That's yours too. Yeah. I think
But I'm
Layla Abu
another one.
Layla, the author, really spoke to me. The first book I read was Minaret of hers, and then The Translator. And these, I think, because of my background as somebody who also went to these English schools in Sudan, you know, and then went abroad, but was a Muslim and Sudanese. So she tells the story of being in Sudan, kind of living an upper middle class life, going to English schools, then going to the University of Khartoum. I also went there. And so you know, she has these beautiful descriptions where you can just imagine yourself there with the smells and the taste of the food. And then she goes to Scotland, and she lives as a Muslim Sudanese there. That's one of the reasons why I was really drawn to her work. But also her book Lyrics, Ali, was for me just a beautiful look into the 50s and history in Sudan at a time where, you know, I wasn't there. My parents told me about it. I think a lot of Sudanese, their parents would tell them about, you know, Az-Zaman al-Jamil, the beautiful days, you know, and it's just like, what are these beautiful days? And she paints that portrait in such a beautiful way. And in English, I think that is a really important aspect of this, is that it's just, it can be more widespread and more people can read about it and understand the history of that time in Sudan in English. It's also in Arabic, but I think it's important when these authors translate their works to other languages. It helps with what Khalid was saying, that maybe we could be ambassadors for ourselves. You know, we teach people of who we are and our history. When the Arab Spring was happening around us, you know, so a lot of Sudanese were going on Facebook and saying, hey, you know, 1964, we you know, نحن برضو طلعنا الشارع and we had a revolution. It's just like, we're over here, you know, we have something too. And
I'll post a link to Isma'il's really, he did a really great piece interviewing some of those, the people who were the students and the revolutionaries at that time. But
Absolutely. And so all of this is either known or forgotten or purposefully ignored. I don't know. But especially in the Arab world, you know, and
I don't think it's purposely ignored. I think there is, they just don't care.
They don't care.
They don't care because we don't we're not doing enough to show it in the right way. You know, there's no interest.
Is it on us 100%, Lakin? You know what I mean? Like, for example, yesterday I was talking with my friends at a gathering about Egypt, our closest neighbor to the north, and, you know, the stereotypes about Sudanese, and talking about the Sudanese also in the same way that Passion Henderson asked me in the 80s in Houston, Texas. انتوا عندكم قرود برا البيت, انتوا عندكم فيل, انتوا ساكنين في قطاطي. It's like, what do you
translate,
live in
please?
I'm sorry. Do you live in huts? Do you have monkeys outside? Egypt, our neighbor. Sudanese have been going to Egypt for decades. The relationship is strong. Why? Sudanese
and Egyptians were one country. That's you know, that's even worse.
I want to get back to a point that Khalid made, but to answer Hind's question, and you know, certainly Layla Abu Layla is a great example, I think, for Sudanese living in the diaspora, because she captures both the complexities of what it means to be Sudanese, but also living in the West, and her short stories, Colored Lights, I think is just incredible. But I mean, the two Sudanese, I think, thinkers that really, I think, have shaped how I approach, you know, the late poet Muhammad Abdul Hayy, and then the artist Ibrahim As-Salahi, which I thought Hana would bring up.
That would have been too easy. I'm sorry, because he's my uncle. We should explain that.
Muhammad Abdul Hayy I think was one of the poets of a literary movement in the 60s known as the Al-Ghaba al-Sahra. You know, the forest and the desert, that tried to bridge this idea, or to, you know, to showcase the multiple cultural roots of Sudan. The forest representing Sudan's Africanness, and then the desert representing Sudan's Arabness, and to show that they actually, you know, in Sudan became one. And in one of his poems, one of his most famous poems, the Homecoming, I mean, he shows, I mean, he goes into details how this meeting, you know, takes place, and he uses the term al-Awda al-Sinnar, homecoming to Sinnar, Sinnar being the first major Islamic sultanate in Sudan in the 1500s, where tribesmen that came from different places intermarried and intermixed with locals, creating this new thing. And also wrapped up, you might say, in a spirit of tolerance, of tasawwuf, Sufism, emphasizing you know, mutual respect and tolerance of different ethnic backgrounds. And I think that's why that poem and the literary movement in general really, I think, was more than any other able to capture the you know, the essence of what it is to be Sudan. Ibrahim al-Salahi, the artist, in his work, combining the different local native African shapes with Arabic letters, I think visually was really able to capture that. I mean, when I think of Sudanese you know, what it means to be Sudanese, I mean, the paintings of Ibrahim Salahi to me are really important. But the question that Khalid raised, I mean, and Hana also raised, I mean, is it on us? I mean, I think one of the issues, but whether it be in the Arab world or in Africa, is that you have these cultural, political centers. In the Arab world, Cairo, Damascus, Baghdad, what I call the axis, you know, the Cairo-Damascus cultural axis. And these are historical capitals of you know, the Arabo-Islamic world. But the cultural production of these cities is what dominates, you know, the general understanding of what it is to be Arab, marginalizing different cultural productions, whether it be North Africa, the Maghreb, like Morocco, Tunisia, or East Africa, Sudan, Zanzibar, you know, Eritrea, or even, you know, the home ancestral homelands of, you know, Hijaz and Yemen. They're marginalized in this you know, this cultural axis of these three you know, historical cities. That, so I mean, I think the issue, I mean, when I say marginalized Arab cultures, I mean, it's not just Sudan. I think there are other territories that are also marginalized. The same thing when we talk about Africa. I think the general perception that the world has of what it is to be African is based on an understood African, because that's the, you know, region closest to Europe, that's the region closest to America, and the interaction you know, was greatest with these areas, you know, neglecting that, you know, Africa is diverse. There's East African, South African, North African, that, you know, the citizens, the peoples of these regions don't always look the same. They're the culture, you know, it's different. So I think
Isma'il, no, I think now I think now it's going to be different, because, you know, up until, I don't know, 60 years ago, there wasn't enough information for anyone to know anything about anything, you know, unless you really want to. But now with the internet and with everything that's happening, and with, you know, this access to information, I think in the future it will be a lot better, because now people, you know, and everybody's making an effort. And of course, you know, even in the West, people are making an effort and being very, like, you know, politically correct about everything, and then what do you want to be called, and how do you do this, and even in the media they're trying to diversify. And so I think it will be better, because now people have access to more information, you know.
Right.
But again, it comes back to us. We need to provide information for them to know about. And of course, you know that, you know, in a lot of times, if you don't give them something interesting, they don't know. Now you have like, what, a minute to tell a story? Like you have all these videos that are super fast, and you have to tell them, you know, your whole point in it. So if we don't provide them with that material, you know, nobody's gonna know anything about us. I mean, you know, a lot of people will say, why do we need anybody to know about us? We should just, great, absolutely, yes. You should know about yourself and you know, trust yourself, but also to market yourself, to market the country, to market, you know, because this is going to be good for all of us. You know, I mean, I have such a hard time traveling, and you know, people just, when you say Sudan, people remember the same things that are in the media. So whatever we like it or not, people, you say Sudan, people say Darfur, the South, the Janjaweed, the, you know, these are the things that people remember. So we need to work hard on providing this material that, you know, people will remember us by, you know. And now it's happening. Yani shwaya shwaya, it's happening.
Oh yeah, it's definitely changing.
So I wanted to jump in, and maybe for the last few minutes that we have left, is I don't want to take too much of everyone's time. You know, I wanted to specifically have this conversation during Black History Month. And, you know, all of you are aware of the Black Lives Matters movement. You're aware of the violence that is inflicted on African Americans and Black Americans in the United States, and are very aware of, you know, the history of racial oppression here. Khalid, you had the opportunity to come to the United States over the last year to visit it. I don't know if it was your first time here, but I wanted to ask all three of you to share your thoughts on the relationship that you think that Afro-Sudanese in particular have with African Americans. And Hana, let me start with you. No?
No, I have a lot to say, because we're talking about
okay.
We are talking about this at every gathering, every azuma, and every lunch.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sudanese are in denial about their Blackness a lot of the time here in this country. And the recent environment is starting to change that, with the Black Lives Matter movement and the shooting of young Black men by police officers. I think that is starting to change, and fathers and mothers are starting to tell their children differently. One mother was telling me the other day that she has sons, and the father was telling his sons, pull up your pants, wear, dress sharply, walk straight, wear your backpack whenever you're walking around. You are not like them. Do not be like them. You're not like them. Right? And this is what I've been hearing for the past, like, maybe decade or so, that this idea that, we are not them. We are, whatever that means to that Sudanese mother or father, right? But a lot of times it's looking down upon African Americans, if we just say it bluntly. Whether it's, whether it means don't be a gangster like them, don't be a criminal like them, whatever that connotates. The idea was to separate yourself, your image, from the image of that African American boy. Mm-hmm. Then with the police shootings and with Black Lives Matter, I think the sons, started talking to their parents, just like, when I'm walking down the street or driving a car, that policeman doesn't know I'm Sudani. We're all the same. We are all the same. Society looks at us as Black. We are Black, and they're starting to challenge their parents. And so the parents are now having these conversations. I have girls, so it's less of a conversation, but they're really starting to have these tough conversations about, we are Black. My parent wouldn't have been able to even come to this country had it not been for a civil rights struggle that happened in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And we owe African Americans, because of their struggle, we were able to come here. You, my parent, are able to come here and make a life and raise me. So I can be smart about my behavior and my image, but not because I want to differentiate myself from my Black brother, So this is what's happening these days, and it's a lot of interesting conversations. And you see the Sudanese fathers just kind of listening now, because it is real, and it's getting real. And whether that means a new camaraderie and an understanding of African Americans, I don't know. But little plug in here, I have a new podcast that is going to be coming out very soon, supported by NPR. It's called The Stoop. And it's me and my African American colleague at KALW, Leela Day. And I think it's going to be the first podcast to really talk and dive into the relationship between African immigrants and African Americans in this country.
I'm so excited about that, by the way, and congratulations.
Thank you. We can't wait for it to be launched. It's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about these issues, but they are real, and our children are living them as well. And there's no right answer, but I think talking about it just makes it easier for everybody, and prevents this otherizing of Black people, of Black folks, of the Black boy, you know, بالنسبة للسودانيين, for the Sudanese community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Isma'il, you're a Black man, right? That's the box I'm smushing you in. What are some of your thoughts on this, either from from your personal perspective, as well as when you're on the road as a journalist in East Africa?
Right. I mean, the Sudanese experience in the United States is one that's shaped by both skin color, it's shaped by culture, and it's shaped, by the fact that, the descendants of immigrants. So, I mean, there are different elements that shape, and it's in its very early stages. It's, in the process of maturing. But I think linking, and the position of African migrants within the larger African American experience is not limited to Sudanese, but it's limited to it's reflected by and experienced by different communities. I mean, the fact that we had a president was, even someone like him was at times, his commitment to the African American community was questioned, and so forth. I think it's a process, but definitely more. Sudanese in America are coming to realize, how important it is to link to different communities, African American community, and not something that's recent, but I mean, you can go back, to decades where Sudanese have been a part of the African American struggle. Like Sheikh Ahmed Hassoun, who was the personal imam of Malcolm X, in his last days of his life. I mean, the debate on Sudanese identity, reflects here in the United States, and I think, again, that's maturing with time. I do think that the experience of Afro-Latinos, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, I think more than any other community resembles that of Sudanese, being not caught between, but shaped by both culture and skin color, and where and how does one fit in general society. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. But as time progresses, I think we're going to see new voices, new developments in how Sudanese identify themselves and what struggles they link to. It's a process. Identity is not a stagnant thing. It's a process that changes with time.
Yeah. And Khalid, I know that you had visited the United States as a human rights fellow last year, and went down to some of the southern states. What was some of your experience like in the last few minutes that we have?
It was an incredible experience. It was very eye-opening. But I want to get back to that point about Sudanese now changing and looking at themselves as being part of the Black community in America, I think is because most of the Sudanese people that went to America immigrated for a reason, that they want social justice, and they see that this is a huge part of what happened in Sudan. This is why we're here right now, because the divide got us to leave. It wasn't good for anyone. It wasn't good for the Arabs or the non-Arabs, but it's at the end of the day, this is what we're trying to avoid. So when they come here, I think especially young couples, or they come with a fresh mind, the open mind, and I think it's they try as much as they can to do what they couldn't do back home, which is unite and do things. That's I think how I look at it, because now they're younger. Before, the people that went to America were fewer, and they were always maybe older a little bit, and of course again, it's the information. Now they know a lot of things, and they know a lot about the culture and so on. But when I did the documentary about civil rights and human rights, I met everybody from Martin Luther King, the Civil Rights Museum in Tennessee, to Malcolm X's, some of Malcolm X's family, to the African American Civil War Museum. So I've tried to trace the whole thing of what happened. How do you have your civil rights? What is the difference between civil rights and human rights? And how do you and you see all these things, and in America, the good thing is, again, is the Constitution, is this idea of rightness, that we are America, we have to be good, and this is how we are. And Hillary Clinton actually said that once in a debate. She's like, America is great because America is good. And I was watching, I was like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? But it's that idea that they have with themselves, and that's why they're like, oh, we abolished slavery, we did this, but they don't never talk about the Jim Crow laws. They never talk about, all the other things that happen. So, you see the divide. The divide is there. It's definitely there. It's in the laws. It's in things change. But again, and now of course you have Trump in power and so on. This, I connected to a lot of people there. They were, the blacks with their problems. The African Americans with their problems, and some of them are saying, why are we called African Americans? Why is this called Asian American? Why is this? And the whites are called Americans, like why is that? Why are you segregating us and making the original one the white man, right? So I had that conversation with an African American in Mississippi. He was a truck driver. It was amazing. And the same thing. So I could, being Sudanese, of course, you jump again to be Arab, and you talk to the, Muslim Americans, the Palestinians and the Syrians and so on. And you see as well, they talk about the segregation, they talk about this, and they talk about that. And I think, to end this, I think there's a good thing about being Sudanese, is that you can switch. You belong to more than two worlds. You belong to more than one world, which is, you're not in one box. You're a lot of people. And I think this is what we should be proud of. But I think that the main problem is trying to not favor one box over the other. Just be proud of ourselves as a nation, and be proud of our history, and find out about our history. Just know, because that changes a lot of things. And the government, of course, is not helping at all with whatever is happening.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. I definitely I want to thank each one of you for joining us and sharing your perspectives. The last thing that you mentioned, Khalid, kind of got me thinking that I always joke with my friends that I'm in. People don't know back, and so I'm able to sort of be in different spaces and hear things and be. When I was younger, I felt like maybe I felt alienated, that I was separate. Like I was with the Arabs, but I'm with African Americans, but I'm not quite black. And if I'm with, let's say, South Asians, they all assume that I'm Pakistani or Indian, and I'm not that at all. As I grew older, I feel more comfortable with, kind of that balance of my identities, and I actually find it to be an asset. So I want to thank Hana Baba, journalist from KALW out in the Bay Area, for joining us. Thank you. And Isma'il Kushkush, a journalist out in New York City. who works with the New York Times and other similar print publications. And Khalid Albaih, who is joining us from Paris but lives in Qatar, in Doha, Qatar, where he is an artist and works at the Qatar Museum as well. And we were supposed to have Emi Mahmoud, Mahmoud, who is an international slam poet, join us as well. She was traveling, she was flying in from Europe and was not able to join us, but she did share with us some thoughts that I think would be really great to close our Zolsol roundtable. And what she says here is that it's really important for us to reclaim the story and take ownership of the things that inspire us. From writers to cooks to music, I feel our identities are deeply rooted in a vibrant past. I love how a lot of the Sudanese songs, for example, have come from the old stories the grandmothers used to tell. Expressing our identities with nuance means learning to evolve without totally breaking from the past. And I think that that's a really great place for us not to end our conversation, but to just pause it. And so again, I want to thank our my three panelists, and I would like to invite anyone who is watching to continue the conversation using the hashtag Zolsol, and be on the lookout for the links and all of the resources that were mentioned today. I'll be posting that up as well, and the conversation for the rest of Black History Month. So thank you again. I'm going to be signing out. Again, my name is Hind Makki, and I was really happy to host this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.